Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn, and today I have a flip of the latest Spellbinders club kits for February 2023. Here's a quick look at the 4 cards that I'll be making in today's video, and as usual in my flip videos, I'll have at least one flat, one layered, one interactive, and one pop-up card. And so if you're interested in any particular card, you can always skip ahead to just that section of the video. So without further ado, let's make these. Okay, so getting right into my flat card, I have a card base here, and I'm going to actually work off of directly onto, I should say, my card base, which technically my self-imposed rule for a flat card is that I can add at most one additional layer on top of my card base. But for the idea that I have in mind, I thought that I would go ahead and work directly onto the card base because I think it will work out okay. And so I'm gonna give it a go. I am starting off with the clear stamp of the month. There are some really fun Easter themed bunnies, and actually one of them is very Easter themed because there's an Easter egg. But I think the other two would be great for just general, maybe springtime. So I do think that it is a pretty versatile set, and the sentiments included are pretty versatile as well. So I've got that stamped out with VersaFine Onyx Black. My initial thinking was that I would color with some of my color pencils just to keep it very soft. And so usually if I'm gonna be coloring with alcohol markers, then I'll stamp with maybe a hybrid ink like Nouveau ink. You could get the coordinating dies to go with the clear stamp of the month. So there is the option, there's 2 options. You could either get the stamp by itself or get the stamp and the die. And if you have the die, it's really great to die cut your mask. And that's what I've done. So I've die cut from the masking paper that I use is just Avery repositionable labels. And they come in full sheets, and you can cut them down and die cut very easily from them. So that's what I've done to create my mask. And I took the diamond die out of the small die of the month, and I've die cut that out of just some foam. I happen to buy foam in sheets, and they do already come with adhesive on the back. And so that's kind of convenient. It's a very sticky adhesive, so I only peeled back just like a little corner of it. But I'm using it as a stamp, essentially. And I've got 2 shades of purple from my Versacolor. This is a pigment based ink, and it has some really rich color, so I love it. And I'm just going for dark at the bottom. Towards the middle, I've inked up using both the light and the dark purple, so giving it a little bit of an ombre finish. And I am trying to stamp, right off the edge just to make it feel like the pattern is continuing off the edge of the card. And I am going for, it's not going to be a perfect, because it's not perfectly spaced, but I'm okay with that. And I'm stamping right onto my, what would have been, but is now masked off, but what would have been the stamped image of the bunny. And I don't want this diamond pattern that I'm creating, I don't want it to extend all the way to the right edge. of my card, and so I'm giving myself like a really straight line. So just using a little bit of washi tape, I've taped down the line where I want my diamond pattern to end. And one thing to kind of be careful with, I wasn't really paying attention very closely, but if you use a small block like this and you have a large ink pad like I'm using, I got ink on the edges of my block, and in some areas on my card that did touch down onto my card base a little bit and left some ink smudges. So when I do this method again, I'm going to definitely be a lot more careful and mindful of that. And I just scooched my washi tape down a little bit so that I can actually draw a definitive line. And I just used one of my alcohol markers, just whichever one that was closest in color. It happened to be a Spectrum Noir tri-blend brush. And here I'm just going to peel up my mask. And it's always such a wonderful reveal to to peel this up and see your stamped image, perfectly placed with the background. The coordinating die does leave a little bit of a white border all the way around your stamped image, but I like that look against this. And so this card's actually going to end up being completely flat because we're working 100% right directly onto the card base. And just using the darker of the two purples, I've stamped out the sentiment. And I thought about coloring it in, but when I was looking at this, I kind of like the simplicity of leaving the stamp just black and white, just as it is, and not introducing more colors to it. So that is my flat card. Now onto my layered card. This card is going to be a gatefold, which I've cut a piece that is 5.5 by 8.5, and along that 8.5 inch edge, I've scored it at 2 1/8 from both ends. And that gives us a gatefold that will fold down to USA 2 in size. So folded, it's still 4 1/4 by 5.5. But on the front, you just have the two panels that are 2 1/8 inch wide. I am lining the our gates with some solid color cardstock all the way to the edge. So I've cut those strips of pink paper to 2 1/8 by 5.5. So there won't be any border showing. And I'm just trimming. I had a little bit of overhang, so I'm just trimming a little bit of that solid color cardstock off and making sure that everything folds down nice and flat. And it should all meet up right in the center there. And what's great about this die, it does have an additional outer edge die if you wanted to use it to actually cut your card front. So I don't end up using that because I'm modifying this how you could use this as a gatefold. And you actually have two options for these decorative panels here. There's the one that I'm using, which is a little bit more of a leafy design, and then the other die is a little bit more of a geometric pattern. And so this is, I like that they've given us two options there. So one that's a little bit floral and one that's a little bit more geometric. So it's nice to have that variety. And you just take the same die and you cut it twice. And it'll work just fine on both panels. You would just rotate the die cut 100 or flip it, rotate it 180 degrees, and then you can use it on the opposite side. So in this case, on the other gate. And I've actually die cut it out of the same soft pink color that I die cut the panels underneath this. And the effect of it is it almost makes it look like it's an embossed panel. So I think that's kind of neat, and it's just adding some really great texture without adding, additional colors. So that helps make the centerpiece of this gatefold. It's going to help make that stand out more and be like a proper sort of focal image. So using that sort of inner aperture die, which is sort of I guess it's like an elongated circle, because the section in the center is straight. So it's as if you took a circle, cut it in half, and just like stretched it and connected the lines, the two halves. And I've die cut that once out of some pearlescent specialty card. Here I have two. Now this works better if you're using thinner cardstock than what I'm using. So I would recommend, I'm using 100-pound, just some scrap cardstock that I have, but it's 100-pound weight. And I would recommend, something thinner, like maybe a 65 pound, because then you don't have to do what I'm doing here, where I'm actually needing to like trim my gates down a little bit, just so that when these tabs are positioned where they need to be positioned, there's actually room for it to still fold down flat. And basically that bit of scrap is roughly, this doesn't have to be exact, but it's roughly, I would say, like around 2 inches by 3/4 of an inch, and I just fold it in half, and I have two. And I fold it in half, and then I kind of sandwiched, the gates between each of those folded halves. And I lined up this, I used that same sort of inner aperture die to cut a second piece out of that same soft pink. And I have, I positioned it and glued it down. And this is going to actually serve as a bit of a locking mechanism for our gatefold. And because the expectation is for this to essentially, glide between, the gates, I'm just using some plain old, transparent Scotch tape, and that's just going to help smooth out that difference in cardstock between the extra layer of cardstock that these little tabs introduce. And that way it will glide a little bit more easily, as opposed to getting caught in on the edge of the card. So I'm gonna do kind of the same thing here. So I'm putting my tape here, but it's sticky side face up. I'm gonna put glue across these two. I've been calling them tabs. Maybe they're more like, wings. I don't know. I don't know what the technical term of this piece would be, but it's kind of just like a little hinge. But I'm going to attach this top layer, which has my stamped image, which I colored off camera just to save a little bit of time. But that's one of the stamped images from the Clear Stampin' Die of the Month. So, so these are going to match up perfectly because I use the same die to cut them out. And I am going to, it's easier to, it's hard to find exactly where, because you can't see where, where those wings kind of meet up in the center. So it's easier to actually, when you put this on, do what I just did there and bend the card a little bit so that you can, slip the gate in between these two kind of oval pieces. But when the card recipient gets it, they can actually, as it turns out, it's pretty easy to just pull open. But they could also just slide that right off. And I so often neglect the inside of my cards. And one thing that I see quite often that I like, but I haven't done for myself yet, is to stamp an additional image on the inside of the card. And this will also need kind of a inside sentiment as well. But I'll probably have to find something else that's Easter themed to stamp on the inside. The clear stamp of the month does come with sentiment stamps, but for the Easter one, it just says Happy Easter. So I might look through my stash to see if I have something that's a little bit more of like a verse stamp that would work well on the inside of the card. So for now, I'm gonna leave that empty, but I do want to stamp a bunny, and I'm just trying to figure out a good color to use that's going to bring a little bit of the outside of the card into the inside or the center of the card. And so just trying to find the right shade of pink that's going to kind of pick up some of the pinks that are in the stamped image that I colored. And I colored those with my Nuvo Aqua flow markers, which I don't use that often, but they're pretty fun, and I had some pretty bright colors, so I thought they would be perfect for this Easter themed card. And I'm just doing a partial inking because I just want this little bunny, and this one's the easiest of the three to partially ink up because it's pretty easy to avoid all of the foliage at the bottom, where the other two have quite a lot of flowers surrounding them. So that's why I chose this one for this particular technique. You could always just mask off your stamp if you wanted, but I felt this was, for me, just a lot easier. And so that is going to actually pretty much complete my card. Besides the verse that I'll probably have to find and stamp on the inside, but I like keeping the outside kind of simple. So here's how I'm closing it. It's just a little easier to close it this way, where you kind of bend your card front a little bit. But then when the recipient gets this, they can just slide that right off to unlock and open the card. And even if they just started to open the card, it would open pretty easily as well, and it wouldn't ruin or it doesn't tear anything. So however they want to open it, it'll work. Okay, so then now onto my interactive card. So here I am starting off with this panel that I cut just a smidge smaller than USA 2. So the card base folded is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and my panel here is 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. So it's just 1/8 smaller in each dimension. And I took the hexagon die from the small die of the month, and I just did a little bit of a random placement of these hexes across this panel, and created 3 apertures or 3 openings. And we're gonna make a shaker card here, and so I'm lining the back of these openings with some acetate. And so all I've done is just put some double-sided, I use my ATG gun, but some double-sided dry adhesive all the way around all 6 edges of the hexagon, and put some clear acetate. I use pretty thin stuff because I don't think you need anything super thick or anything that's construction weight, because you don't construction weight acetate usually I just use if I need to make a pop-up stand, for example, and you actually need it to like stand straight up, support the weight of a die cut. and all of that good stuff. Or if you are making like a little bit of a fancy box that has an aperture window opening, but because it's a box, you still want it to be sturdy. So you don't want it to be just open, and you want to line it with something that's going to still maintain the original structure of the box before you cut an opening into it. And so that's where I like to use my heavier weight acetate. And now what I'll do, and in general for any shaker card, what you want to do is surround your apertures, your openings with foam. And that will give it some walls, essentially, that will enclose whatever you want to use as shaker bits. And I like to I like to actually, when I'm making my shakers, I like to be kind of generous with my foam. So I'm actually covering essentially, as much as I can of this panel, just so that everything is nice and level. You don't have some bits that are a little bit saggy, and it's gonna all feel like really firm. And so I'm and as I cut down my foam just to get it to fit into these odd shapes, I just have a lot of little bits too, so I just want to use all of those little bits up as well. And also, the closer your foam is to sort of that edge of your shaker openings, the less shaker fill you need to add. Because if you leave a lot of space surrounding your aperture openings, that's space that your shaker bits can fall into. And if it's gonna just be blocked by your panel, it's not going to be visible at all. And so if you get your foam kind of as tight, especially I think especially on the bottom edge of your shaker wells, getting that as close as possible, because usually your shaker bits are going to fall more towards the bottom, and so they're not going to just disappear behind the frame. If you fill it so that it's or if you place your foam so that it's really as close to the aperture opening as possible. So that's the other reason why I like to just be sort of generous with my foam, is so that I don't have to actually use quite as much shaker fill, and whatever I put in there, most of it's going to be visible. So I am making my own little custom mix here of actually, one of these sequin packs is from the Spellbinders Advent Calendar. That was the purple shade one. And then I have this other confetti that I used, which is kind of like a clear iridescent, and it's actually hexagonal in shape. It's from Fun Stamper's Journey, and I'm not sure if Spellbinders sells it anymore. But it's really thin. It's great for adding just a little bit of that iridescent shine. And the way that I like to make my shakers is I like to close off the back with another piece of acetate, so that now my entire panel here is completely enclosed, and when I go to actually put this onto my card base, it's going to be a lot easier for me to position this onto my card, because now all of my shaker fill is it's secure now. It's in there. And the second reason why I like to do this is because you just saw me kind of do a little preview of how this looks against the white of the card base, and I didn't like it. So If I had known in advance that that I wanted to back this with this iridescent mirror card, I actually wouldn't have put the second piece of acetate. I was actually intending on putting it directly onto my card base, but when I saw it a moment ago as I was just previewing it, I didn't like how that looked, and I wanted to back it with something. If you already have that as a plan, you can skip the second piece of acetate and then just apply your cardstock to close off the back of your shaker. So this definitely was a bit of a waste of acetate, but it is one of the reasons why I do like to enclose my shaker panel from the back, and then I can kind of audition different papers behind there if I don't 100% know what I want to put back there. So for me, there's just a lot of upside to doing it that way. And some of the other dies in this set are differently shaped. So you do get like an ornament shape, you have a diamond, and you have a teardrop. And then all of them, so you have those basic shapes, outline dies. And then all of them have a second die that just cuts some details. It doesn't have an outside cutting edge, but it cuts sort of like the foundational layer so that you can build these really sweet little floral arrangements on top of them. And so if you want to get a die cut that looks like the green layer that I have here, you would just combine that detailed die with the outside cutting edge. So the same die that I used to cut out my hexagon aperture openings, I use that combined with the detailed die to cut out these green sort of frames that I have here. And where you see kind of the solid areas in the center, that's where you can start to layer your florals on top. And it's kind of cool because there are different flower shapes that go with each of the different shapes of like the teardrop, the ornament, and the diamond. And it's kind of it's not super obvious so what goes where, but that I think means that you have some flexibility, so you can kind of arrange it in different ways as well. And with the flowers, they do have layers as well. So with this one, there's the two layers, and if you wanted, you could even cut the small little layer to be the centers of your flowers, but instead I just put Nuvo drops because those die cuts would be super tiny. But they are there if you want to use them. And so then I just have a lot of extra little flowers, so I thought I would go ahead and use those as additional accents around the card as well. So here is a final look at my shaker card. So I've got the 3 shaker openings and not quite a honeycomb pattern, but just like a little bit of an abstract pattern. And so my last card is going to be a pop-up card. So here I've got the embossing. This is the 3D embossing folder of the month, and that's new for this year. So that was just introduced this year. And I have the glimmer of the month. And so I've already glimmered that in advance, and I did some selective coloring. So I am really getting into this like very minimalistic kind of look. And a very kind of minimal color palette as well. And so on the inside of the card, this will be a top folding landscape card. And so on the top inside is where I am attaching this panel of solid color cardstock. Then I have my embossed panel, which I've embossed white. And with the glimmer of the month, so it does have 2 sentiment glimmer plates and 1 die that will cut out a sentiment banner. But I actually used what you would normally take to glimmer. I used that as a debossing plate. And so I debossed my sentiment onto some mirror card, and all I did was I used my embossing, like the squishy mat, and then I put my mirror card, the glimmer plate on top of the card, and then a cutting plate. So basically replacing the bottom cutting plate with these kind of squishy embossing mat. And that's how I got that debossed sentiment panel. And just like in the past, I've used debossing plates to glimmer with, I had the thought of trying to do the reverse. Use a glimmer plate as a debossing sentiment. And it does work. So I thought that's cool. So now I'm going to be looking at all of my glimmer sentiments in a different way, because now they can all be debossing sentiments. I find that usually the deboss sentiments work really well on like pearlescent cardstock, mirror cardstock, something like a specialty cardstock that maybe has like a little bit of shine to it. And I think that shine is what helps the lettering of the sentiment actually read a little bit better than if you were to, by comparison, deboss onto just some plain solid color cardstock. That's been my experience. And so that's why I chose this mirror card to deboss with my glimmer plate. And I'm going to keep the outside of this really simple. So it's just the 3D folder with the floral design and this simple sentiment. And then on the inside, you'll have this really kind of like a field of tulips. And with the glimmer of the month, there is the edge die that will cut that shaped edge right along the tops of your flowers. So when I saw that, I thought, well, this is really perfect for, having a shaped border. But also it was, my first thought was to use it in this way as a pop-up. And so to make my little pop-up stand, all I've done is taken some scrap cardstock. This is 4 inches, roughly 4 inches long and maybe about half an inch wide. And I've just scored it at every inch. So 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch. And I folded along those score lines. And to start attaching this, I first fold these pop-up stands in half, and then just placing glue on one of those, the bottommost 1 inch segment. I'm butting it up so that the edge of that is it's going right up to the fold of the card, but not crossing it, so that everything can fold down nice and flat. And then I folded the top right down on top of it. And then here I've placed glue on the opposite end, but not on the first 1 inch section, but on the second 1 inch section. And that's where I'm attaching my field of tulips here. And now on this remaining 1 inch section that's exposed, I can fold the bottom of the card right over top of it. And that's going to attach it to the bottom of the card. And that's what gives you the pop-up. So really, really easy to just custom cut your own little pop-up stands. You can, you can cut that to whatever dimension that you want, depending on, how far away you want that panel to be from the back edge. and how tall. You know, if you weren't using this tulip border, the height of your pop-up stand would just depend on the height of whatever element you wanted to pop up. So here's a final recap of the 4 cards that I created. This is my flat card that features mainly the clear stamp of the month, but the diamond is actually from the small die of the month. This is my flat card, which features the large die of the month, and the stamped image is also from the clear stamp of the month. And I did use the coordinating dies with the clear stamp of the month on both of these cards to on the first card to cut out a mask, and on the second card to cut out the stamped and colored image. My interactive card features the small die of the month, and I think I forgot to mention that I used the debossing plate from the large die of the month to get the thank you sentiment. This is my final card, my pop-up card. It features the 3D embossing folder, the glimmer of the month, which has this field of tulips, and it has glimmered sentiments, which I used as debossing plates to get my sentiment. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'll leave links to all of the Spellbinders clubs in the description box below if you are interested in any of them. And if you are already subscribed to my channel, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. If you haven't already subscribed, I hope you'll consider doing so. And if you ring that notification bell, then you'll be notified whenever I post new videos to my channel. Thanks again. Until next time, happy crafting and have a fantastic day. Bye.